Government experiment. The creatures in A Quiet Place are bioengineered weapons created by a government black ops program. This theory argues that the monsters aren't aliens at all, but rather escaped military experiments designed as the ultimate predator. Supporters point to the creatures' almost perfect design for hunting, their armored plating that resembles engineered composite materials, and their singular focus on sound-based tracking. The theory suggests a weapons development facility was creating apex predators for warfare, combining extreme durability with hypersensitive hearing to hunt enemy soldiers. When the project inevitably lost containment, the creatures spread globally within days. This would explain why the military response seemed so unprepared, because governments knew conventional weapons were useless against their own creation. The timeline matches up with classified military testing schedules, and the creature's behavior shows tactical intelligence beyond simple animal instinct. If true, this means humanity's extinction came from its own hands, not from the stars. Alien invasion. The canonical explanation treats the creatures as extraterrestrial invaders who arrived on Earth via meteor. In the first film, news clippings on Lee Abbott's conspiracy board show reports of objects falling from space, with estimates suggesting 3 to 4 meteor strikes hit Earth before communications went dark. The creatures exhibit biology impossible for Earth evolution, including armor that withstands bullets and explosives, a complete absence of eyes, and the ability to survive without visible food sources for extended periods. Their arrival coincides with a 72-hour period where global infrastructure collapsed entirely. The meteor delivery system explains their worldwide distribution pattern, hitting major population centers across multiple continents simultaneously. This theory is supported by the Day One prequel, showing the initial New York City impact. What makes this invasion unique is the lack of technology or organized strategy, just raw predatory instinct and biological superiority. The creatures don't conquer or colonize, they simply hunt, suggesting they might be the universe's ultimate invasive species. Evelyn's pregnancy. Evelyn Abbott's decision to have a baby during the apocalypse seems suicidal until you realize she was likely already pregnant before Day One. The timeline in the first film jumps from the initial invasion to 474 days later, when Evelyn is visibly in her third trimester. Working backward, she conceived roughly 200 days after the invasion began, or possibly even before it. This theory suggests the pregnancy was unplanned, occurring in the chaos of early survival when contraception wasn't a priority. Some fans argue Evelyn and Lee chose to have the baby as a symbol of hope, refusing to let the creatures end humanity's future. Others point to the psychological need for normalcy in extreme trauma, where continuing life patterns provides mental stability. The pregnancy also serves as the family's ultimate test of their survival system, proving their soundproofing and protocols work even with a crying infant. Whether planned or not, the baby becomes both the family's greatest vulnerability and their strongest motivation to find the creature's weakness. The Island Solution. The Island in A Quiet Place Part 2 reveals a massive plot hole. The creatures can't swim, so any coastal community could have survived easily. When Marcus and Regan discover the island colony, it's thriving with dozens of survivors living normally, because the water creates an impenetrable barrier. This raises the question of why the Abbott family stayed on their isolated farm for over a year instead of moving to the island immediately. The theory suggests Lee knew about the island, but believed the farm's established soundproofing systems were safer than the risky journey. The creatures' inability to swim likely stems from their heavy armor plating and density. They simply sink. This means any island, oil rig, or boat became an instant safe haven, yet millions died on the mainland. Geography became destiny in this apocalypse. Creatures are blind. The creatures in A Quiet Place have no eyes whatsoever, relying entirely on hyper-advanced echolocation and sound tracking. Their heads feature armored plates that open to reveal inner ear mechanisms when they detect noise, suggesting their entire frontal structure is dedicated to auditory processing. This explains why Lee can stand inches from a creature at the nail scene without being detected, as long as he remains silent. The theory proposes their home planet evolved them without light, possibly in deep caves, or on a world with no star, making vision unnecessary. Their hunting pattern involves responding to the slightest sounds while completely ignoring visual stimuli like movement or light. This biological design makes them nearly perfect predators on Earth, where most prey species rely on staying visually hidden. The creature's blindness is their greatest strength, forcing humans to adapt to a sensory world they don't naturally inhabit. Military failure. Modern military forces, with tanks, fighter jets, and nuclear capabilities, failed to stop the creatures within 72 hours of invasion. This theory explores how humanity's most advanced weapons proved useless against the creature's biological advantages. The armored plating withstands 50 caliber rounds and explosive impacts, rendering conventional firearms ineffective. Fighter jets and helicopters create constant noise that attracts hordes of creatures, making aerial support impossible without drawing swarms. The creatures' speed, clocked at over 50 miles per hour in short bursts, means they can close distance before artillery can properly target them. Most critically, loud sudden noises like gunfire attract creatures but don't disorient them the way continuous high-frequency sounds do. Military strategy relies on overwhelming firepower, but the creature's distributed individual hunting style means there's no central target to destroy. Tank columns and fortified positions fell because the creature's climbing ability and armor-piercing claws could breach any defense. The military's failure suggests humanity needed to discover the frequency weakness before any organized resistance could succeed. Bo Abbott's death on day 89 served as the harsh lesson the family needed to survive long-term. This theory argues that while tragic, losing their youngest child taught Lee and Evelyn the absolute nature of the sound rules in ways that abstract warnings never could. Before Bo's death, the family might have been less rigorous about their protocols, more willing to take small risks. After losing him to a single sound from a toy rocket, they implemented the extreme measures seen in the first film: the sand paths, the painted floorboards marking safe steps, the silent communication system. Lee's overwhelming guilt over Bo's death drove him to perfect their survival system, and later sacrifice himself to save his remaining children. Some fans suggest Lee subconsciously sought death as atonement, making his final choice to draw the creature away less about strategy and more about redemption. Bo's death wasn't meaningless. It purchased the survival knowledge that kept Marcus, Regan, and Evelyn alive for another year. The waterfall. The waterfall scene demonstrates that loud, constant noise creates a sound-masking safe zone where the Abbott family can speak freely. The theory explaining this phenomenon relates to how the creature's hearing works. They detect changes and variations in sound, rather than processing constant ambient noise. The waterfall produces around 90 to 100 decibels of unchanging white noise that overwhelms their sensory system, making human voices within that range undetectable. This explains why the family doesn't simply live at the waterfall permanently. They'd need the infrastructure and resources from their farm, and the waterfall is too far for daily travel with children. The scene also reveals the creature's hearing limitation. Constant loud environments create blind spots in their perception. This principle applies to other locations, like rivers, highways with traffic, or industrial areas with running machinery. The waterfall moments give Lee and Marcus rare father-son bonding time and show that normal human interaction still exists, just constrained by geography. Understanding sound masking became crucial for later survival strategies. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos like this all the time. Subscribing would really help out. Cochlear implant weapon. Regan's cochlear implant accidentally creates the high-frequency feedback that becomes humanity's first effective weapon against the creatures. The theory traces how this discovery happened. Marcus notices the creatures react with pain when Regan's device malfunctions, creating a specific frequency around 4 kHz. The feedback forces the creature's head plates to open, exposing vulnerable inner tissue and disorienting them long enough for a shotgun blast to be effective. What makes this discovery remarkable is that world militaries with billions in research funding never found this weakness, but a deaf teenager stumbled upon it through her disability. The implant's feedback falls in a frequency range that specifically targets the creature's exposed auditory organs when their armor opens. This explains why normal gunfire noise doesn't hurt them. It's not sustained or high frequency enough. Regan's weapon only works at close range, about 10 to 15 feet, requiring extreme courage to deploy. The theory suggests militaries focused on destroying the armor rather than exploiting the creature's sensory mechanisms. By Part 2, Regan has weaponized this knowledge, combining the feedback with a microphone to broadcast the painful frequency over wider areas. Monsters hunt solo. The creatures operate as solitary territorial hunters rather than pack animals, which significantly impacts survival strategies. Throughout both films, the creatures respond individually to sounds, often arriving one at a time rather than in coordinated groups. This theory suggests they establish hunting territories and compete with each other for prey, explaining why survivors occasionally see only single creatures, despite hundreds being in the region. Their territorial nature means drawing one creature away doesn't typically alert others, as seen when Lee sacrifices himself by screaming to isolate the creature from his children. This hunting pattern also explains why some survivors have lasted so long. If the creatures hunted in coordinated packs like wolves, humans would have been extinct within months. The solo hunting style creates opportunities for evasion and misdirection that organized group hunters would eliminate. Lee knew. Lee Abbott planned his own death and spent his final weeks preparing Marcus to survive without him. This theory argues that Lee recognized his survival system had a fatal flaw. Eventually, someone would make a fatal mistake, and he chose to ensure it was him rather than his children. Evidence includes Lee's increased focus on teaching Marcus to hunt and overcome fear in the weeks before his death, almost like passing final lessons. His workshop experiments with the cochlear implant show he was desperately searching for any weakness in the creatures. When the creature attacks at the grain silo, Lee's decision to scream and draw it away appears instant, but the theory suggests he'd already decided he would be the sacrifice if needed. His final words to Regan, signing, "I have always loved you," carry the weight of planned goodbye rather than spontaneous declaration. Lee's death wasn't random. Heroism, it was the logical conclusion of a father who knew he couldn't protect his children forever and chose when and how he'd make his final contribution to their survival. Red lights. The Abbott family's colored light system represents a sophisticated communication network, with red specifically meaning immediate danger requiring lockdown. The lights positioned around their property create a visual warning system that works despite the need for silence. Red lights in their house trigger when creatures are nearby or when someone is in distress, as seen when Evelyn goes into labor. This theory suggests other surviving families likely developed similar systems, creating potential for networked communication between isolated groups. The colored light choice isn't arbitrary. Red universally signals danger across human cultures and remains visible at long distances even in daylight. The system's sophistication implies months of refinement and testing to ensure reliability. Some fans theorize the lights could eventually link survivor communities into a coordinated resistance network. Day 1 Timeline. Piecing together, the Day 1 timeline reveals that society collapsed within 72 hours of the first meteor strikes. The Day 1 prequel shows the creatures arriving in New York City during what appears to be a normal afternoon, with meteors hitting multiple locations simultaneously. News reports mention 3 major impact sites, suggesting coordinated strikes across different continents. The creatures' immediate hunting begins within minutes of landing, giving no adjustment period or warning. Within the first day, communication networks fail as people fleeing and screaming attract endless creatures. By Day 2, power grids collapse without workers to maintain them. Day 3 sees military responses failing catastrophically, with footage showing tanks overrun and helicopters crashing. The 474-day jump in the first film means the Abbott family survived over a year, using their sound-dampening farm. This accelerated timeline explains why so few survival communities exist. Humanity had no time to adapt or relocate to safe zones. The Day 1 events transformed Earth from thriving civilization to post-apocalyptic wasteland faster than any previous fictional catastrophe. Emmett's wife. Emmett's transformation from family man to isolated survivor suggests his wife and children died in particularly traumatic circumstances early in the invasion. His bunker in the factory shows extensive preparation, implying he knew something terrible was coming or adapted quickly to the new reality. The theory suggests Emmett's family died because they didn't understand the sound rules fast enough, possibly making noise during the chaotic first weeks. His cynicism about the island broadcast and his refusal to help initially stem from survivors' guilt and the belief that hope gets people killed. Emmett's character represents the psychological cost of survival. He's alive, but emotionally dead inside. His bunker's elaborate soundproofing and supply stockpiling reveal someone who planned to survive alone indefinitely. The few belongings visible suggest he left his home quickly, taking only essentials and abandoning memories. Emmett's arc in Part 2 involves Regan breaking through his isolation, forcing him to care about something beyond mere survival again. The Island Colony. The island community in A Quiet Place Part 2 thrives because water creates a permanent barrier the creatures cannot cross. The colony includes dozens of survivors who maintain something resembling normal life, with children playing and adults working without constant fear. This theory explores what advantages the island offers beyond creature protection: sustainable fishing for food, rainwater collection systems, and existing infrastructure from the island's pre-invasion buildings. The colony's discovery of the island likely happened within weeks of the invasion, when coastal survivors realized the creatures drowned attempting to follow prey into water. The Beyond the Sea radio broadcast originates from the island, suggesting they have working generators and communication equipment. This community represents humanity's best chance for long-term survival and eventual civilization rebuilding. The island's isolation means limited resources for expansion, but it provides a safe base for coordinated exploration and rescue missions to the mainland. Creatures' weakness. High-frequency feedback specifically damages the creatures because it targets their exposed auditory organs when their head plates open. This theory dives into the biology behind their weakness. The creature's armor plates must open to precisely locate sound sources, exposing sensitive tissue inside. The feedback frequency around 4 kHz causes pain severe enough to stun them for several seconds, creating vulnerability windows. This suggests their home planet environment lacked high-frequency sounds, meaning they never evolved defense mechanisms against such stimuli. The opening plates might also serve as cooling systems for their sound processing organs, making them unable to keep the armor closed indefinitely. What makes this weakness critical is its accessibility. The frequency can be generated with simple audio equipment, meaning any survivor with electronics knowledge could weaponize it. The creature's inability to adapt to this weakness suggests they lack higher intelligence or learning capability. Understanding this vulnerability transforms humanity's position from helpless prey to potential survivors with a fighting chance. Marcus's evolution. Marcus Abbott transforms from the family's fearful weak link to a capable survivor who potentially surpasses his father's abilities. His character arc begins with paralyzing fear that makes him a liability, freezing during the silo attack and requiring constant protection. The injury to his leg forces Marcus to overcome fear through necessity, learning to move silently despite pain. This theory argues Marcus represents how disability and weakness can become strength through adaptation, paralleling Regan's deafness becoming the key to the creature's defeat. By Part 2, Marcus navigates dangerous territory alone, rescues Regan from drowning, and shows tactical thinking his father would be proud of. His evolution suggests the next generation of survivors will be stronger than the first, having grown up in this world rather than adapting to it. Marcus's journey from scared child to emerging leader shows that courage isn't the absence of fear, but continuing despite it. The bunker network. Multiple survivor families built or discovered interconnected underground bunkers and fortified locations before the invasion's full impact. Emmett's factory bunker shows professional-grade soundproofing and defensive preparation that would take months to complete, suggesting he either prepared before day one or found an existing facility. This theory argues that preppers, military personnel, and paranoid survivalists had underground networks already established that became crucial survival infrastructure. The foundry where Emmett hides features industrial sound dampening from its previous operation, making it naturally suited for the new world. Other survivors likely occupy subway systems, fallout shelters, and basement complexes in urban areas. The bunker network theory suggests isolated survivor communities might eventually establish contact through careful above-ground travel between safe zones. If you found this valuable, subscribe so you never miss new content. Appreciate you watching.